Hi, it's Jen back with a very Merry Christmas sew-along. You got your very top row ready, your very bottom row ready, and now we're on the second block here. These look like holly to me, so we'll call this the holly block. We have the polka dot, and we have your snowman, 4 of the snowman blocks, 3 of the green polka dot. Same construction technique, very straightforward. We'll start off with a square. Just a reminder before you're cutting your fabrics, if you are kind of waiting and cutting those as we move along, that sizing. Size everything so well, good press, clean blade in the rotary cutter, and then get started cutting very accurately. You'll cut out your squares, and then each one of these, this is kind of the block it's kind of expanded so you can see how the block goes together. Very, very straightforward. I always like that. You know, in our first row, we had to make half square triangles. We gave you a couple approaches. We had to assemble that into a pinwheel unit and then make flying geese and then make it all work. And I like sometimes having a little bit of a breather, easier block after a more challenging block has passed. Here with opposite corners, we have our white squares. I'm going to give you 2 approaches on this one, and you can pick your favorite. You can grab that straight edge and draw that line. That's going to be your very first option, and we're just placing that right in that corner. You don't want to be shy of it or extending past your fabric. Right on top, and let's go to the sewing machine and sew directly on that line. Okay, and our next step would be to press away. Warm that up, press away, and we take a little check and make sure we're happy with what we're seeing, that we hit that corner nice and at a 90-degree angle. I could trim that away, but I'm going to do that actually. I'm going to do the other corner first. This time, however, I'm not going to draw the line. In fact, when I've been at quilt retreats, I've heard people say the thing they don't like about something called sew and flip is drawing the line. They don't like doing that. The diagonal seam tape, which you're seeing on my machine here from Cluck Cluck Sew, it not only makes a phenomenal guide for a 1/4 inch seam because I can see that it's drawn on my tape, and it even says a 1/4 inch with a black line. But the reason they call it a diagonal seam tape is about what you're about to see. I don't have to draw the line here. I will instead use the visual lineup of the tape on my machine. This works with any machine, by the way, to get that lined up. So when I come to the machine now, the end of this point here is literally on that red line. I'm going to start, and my eye is right here. I'm not looking here, and I'm not looking here. This is all about that point staying in line with the red line, and that helps me avoid having to draw the line corner to corner. Just an option for you. I always love giving you the options, and then you can try what works best for you. Same result, different approach. That's all we're after, right? Great results. How you get there is up to you, but I want to offer you options as I learn options. We'll trim those 2 to have that corner and then the opposite. And you'll repeat that for, of course, 4 of those for each of our blocks, each of our holly blocks. And then you'll want to lay those out, and so they're in that orientation, always making sure that your white squares are in the opposite corners. Of course, we've got our rectangles, and we have our square right there in the middle. For the center unit, very straightforward, and we press toward our white, so I'll just substitute that. For this unit here, we definitely made the decision to press toward the middle. Here, this is one of our units that's already done. And you can see we went ahead and pressed toward the middle. And that's going to give us interlocking units. Let me change that one out, but let's do one together. Let's just look at that. Here, I am going to sew on this side. Actually, no, I'm going to sew on, just like at the previous video where I checked what side should I sew from. My instinct, obviously, was to sew from this side. But look what's back here. I would have to keep track of that seam and not let it roll on me. Instead, I'm going to sew from this side, and I don't have to worry about that seam rolling because it's in the direction that I'm traveling. So let's go sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance together. Warm our seam, definitely pressing to the white there. And then of course here, notice now on this side, I don't want to sew on this side because as my presser foot comes, I'm going to have to stop and pin that. So I'm going to sew on this side this time, just like before. That little quick momentary evaluation of what side should I be sewing from. And again, pressing. Now here, once we're at this place, just like before, remember we're not just pinning left to right. We are deciding what's important to us. Looking at this block, what's important to us right now are these points come together. For that reason, once we place these right side together, we are taking a check. We want this to click in right there. And right there. Everything else is a little bit negotiable, but not that. I still like to pin down here, but only after I've pinned what is essential. All right, let's go sew that 1/4 inch seam. Let's see how we did. I am very happy with that. Very happy with that. I'm going to press this direction. And I always put that back, okay? Make sure that, because you could see, right? That's a different block. That's not correct. It's always good to reorient so you're not sewing blocks together incorrectly. And once again, pinning here, pinning right there, and then we're in our corners, sew your 1/4 inch seam allowance, press to the middle, you have a block. Again, repeating that for 3 of your polka dot, 4 of your snowman block, and once again, there's a small strip that's in there. You might want to do a measurement check on your blocks. This is a 6.5 inch blocks. Creative Grid has 2 types of rulers for 6.5. They have one that's an actual ruler, 6.5, and another is it's kind of a trim up tool. It's a square up tool. I'm going to show you those two. I find them both useful at different times for different reasons. both 6.5. This is a true ruler. It's got literal measurements. If I wanted to cut 2.5 inch by 6.5 inch strips, I could do it on here. I don't have these lines here. So depending on what you think you're going to be using it for, I love the alignment lines. This is undeniably a phenomenal tool in and of itself. So I just wanted to expose both of those to you. Either way, that should fit into the footprint of a 6.5 inch block, and I think I'm just a little bit under. Sometimes that can be accomplished with just pressing, right? Sometimes if I took too healthy of a seam allowance, I'll go back. I will press that open just a little bit more. The point is, sometimes because of the piecing and maybe pressing, whatever that might be, our blocks end up just a little bit too small. We can adjust. Remember, our rows were supposed to be about 50.5, I believe it was. I'm going off memory. If you're finding that your blocks are a little bit small, coming in a little bit small, these strips that are in between those blocks, you might decide to cut them just a little bit bigger. There's also a strip right out here at the end. That's where you could also add a little bit of girth to that. That's one of the reasons you might actually wait to cut some of these sashing strips until you see what your blocks are coming out in. Just something to think about. All right, so you'll finish up those holly, obviously alternating snowman and polka dot. Our next one is our gifts. There are some things in here, very straightforward patchwork, rectangles and a strip. But let's talk about how we're going to manage that, those little portions, our little bows on our gift. We're moving right along. I'll see you next month where we make our gift row.